Hello there everybody, if it's your first time with us today, welcome, and if you've been here before, welcome back. Today we're continuing our series on tactics, tactical motifs, figuring out ways to gain material and get advantages in our positions with some very nice forcing moves. So what we're looking at today are going to be decoys and deflections. So we're looking at two separate tactical motifs which are very similar and yet inverse of one another. So what do I mean by that? Well, the first one we're going to look at today is a deflection. When we have a deflection occur in chess, what we're doing is we're going to make a move which forces one of the opponent's pieces away from a square. So it's moving it away from a square. That way we're able to gain control of what we want, attack the square we want to control. In a decoy, the inverse happens. So in a decoy tactic, rather than moving a piece away from the square we're trying to get control of, we're moving a piece to a square where it becomes more vulnerable. We're luring it into attack. So similar ideas, we're forcing those enemy pieces onto worse squares so that we can deliver the finishing blow. With the deflection, we're forcing them away, and the decoy luring them to. So let's go ahead and look at our first position here. We have the white pieces and a nice deflection tactic which will allow us to win some material. So what can we play here as white in order to loosen up black's defenses? Go ahead, pause the video, take a minute to think about it if you haven't seen this before. And once you've had a second here, let's go ahead and dive in. Well, of course, the two queens are facing off with one another here, and black's queen is defended by the rook on d8. So it would be really nice if we had a way to move that rook away from the queen. So how can we do that? Well, our deflection tactic's going to be rook to e8 check. And now black only has two ideas. If he moves the king, well, we can use another tactic in order to gain material. If we remember it from another one of our videos, we have the X-ray attack, where we can take this rook through the enemy queen, and now our rook and queen will defend each other, so we've won a rook for free. Black doesn't want to lose a whole rook, so of course he captures our rook, and now that deflection has occurred. The rook has moved away from defense of the queen, and after queen takes d5, we are up queen for rook with a nice looking game. Let's go ahead and see another deflection tactic here before we move on to our decoys. This time we have the black pieces. Go ahead, take another minute, pause those videos, and see how we can kick those white pieces around. How can we use deflection in order to win some material? Well, first move this time, we notice that white's king is attached to the defense of the knight. Deflection can be very similar to the idea of removing the defender. Remember, in remove the defender tactics, we often simply capture the defender. Well, deflection, rather than capturing it, we're forcing those pieces to move away. So how can we start this? Well, first move, we're going to play bishop to c6 with check. Okay, so we're delivering check onto the king here. The king is going to have to move, and once the king moves, he has two options. He can go to c7. What would be the move if king c7? Well, then we can play the move rook h7 check. He can either block with the knight, in which case we simply capture it, so that's not very good, or if the king moves away to another square, either b6 or c6 or d8, then we can play rook takes knight and win the piece. Important to note that if white tries to check us, rook back to d3 makes an X-ray defense for our bishop, and we're not losing the piece. So the only way for white to try to maybe hold here, he's going to play king to d7. Well, keeping with that principle. Same idea as before, rook to h7. And now white has one more try. He can bring his rook in, rook to e7. But keeping with the idea of deflection, what can we do here? Now bishop to g4 check. Now the king is tied down to defense of two pieces. Which one is he going to leave? If he comes to d8 here, then we can play rook takes knight. If he comes over to the C file, C7 or C6, we can play rook takes rook. And lastly, what if he plays king to E8? It's important to note that now his rook is attacking ours, so if we play rook takes rook, we would lose ours. That wouldn't be good, so one more little tactic here. And this time we've made 2 deflections, 3 deflections really, and we're going to finish him off with the skewer. Rook H8 check, and after the king moves up, rook takes rook. Happy days, and we still have a nice attack. Look at everything that is going bad for white. Alright, so those are our deflections. Let's go ahead and move on next to some decoys. So remember, deflections, we're moving the pieces away from the squares they want to be. And now decoy, we're going to lure them toward the square we want, bring them into attacking position. So, what's our decoy going to be in this first position? Pause those videos again, see if you can find it. A nice 2-move tactic here. And this time, it's going to be a queen sacrifice. Who doesn't love that? Queen takes F3 check, and the king is in dire straits. If he moves out of the check, he's down the knight. And of course, if he takes the queen, what's the move? We've made that decoy, we've put the king on the F3 square, and now we can deliver the big shebang, knight E5, forking king and queen, and after the king moves away, knight takes queen, we're up a full queen, or full knight rather, in a nice looking endgame. Let's finish off with one more here today. Final decoy as we're looking at it. A very strange looking position in this one. Black has cordoned off his rooks. They're stuck in the corner behind his knight, which looks like maybe it's in the process of relocating for defensive purposes. Black maybe wants to try to push some pawns, try to attack on the king side, but white has a way to finish off black right now. He can go for a very big attack and checkmate. So, what's a very nice decoy here in the position that white can use to finish off black? Alright, well, let's see if you found it here. This is going to be a double sacrifice for a forced checkmate, and what's our first move here? Bishop takes C7 check. Now there's 2 things that can happen. The king can capture our bishop, or he can move away. Let's look at if he moves away here first. So king to A8, and keeping on with the decoy, he was deflected here first. That's more deflection than decoy. Well, how can we draw him in again? Queen takes A7, another queen sacrifice. And now after the king comes to A7, our bishop has blocked off his escape squares, and rook A1 delivers a big blow. Only way to block is knight A4. And after rook takes A4, that's checkmate. Only other chance for black here was to accept the sacrifice. So after bishop takes C7, what's going to happen now? Well, king has to capture back, of course. So king takes C7, and what's the big blow here? Well, once again, another decoy, drawing black even closer into the position. Queen to E6. Or D6 rather. What a check. Only move king takes D6. And now you'll notice the king has been drawn out of his defensive home, and we can start delivering our attack. Knight to B5, making sure we cordon off the C7 square. Black can't escape there. Our bishop on the diagonal blocks off C6, C5 is blocked by the pawn, D5 by the bishop. The rooks cover all of these squares, only move is king back to D7. How can we keep closing in? Well, rook E7 check comes next. And after king to D8, rook to E8 again. King comes back up, and how are we going to finish him off? Rook to E7 checkmate. The rooks cover all of the squares, the knight covering D6, bishop blocking off the diagonal. And look at that, a beautiful double sacrifice for a wonderful checkmate for white. Hopefully, you've gotten something from this video. You know now how to do deflections, how to use decoys, and get some fast attacks going against the enemy pieces. If you have any questions, be sure to leave them in the comments section below, and I look forward to seeing your punishing attacks in the days to come. Best of luck.